It was an ordinary morning of another workday. 29-year-old Effie Ratley calmly got ready, got into her car, and headed off to work. She had just pulled onto the busy highway when the phone rang. Effie opened the car's central console and instantly regretted it. Mice burst out of the console in all directions. Live mice. Only God knows how they got there or how many there were. Effie, who was deathly afraid of rodents, felt as though an entire swarm of mice had been nesting inside the console. They scattered in every direction, but in the closed space of the car, they had little chance of escaping. Instead, they only terrified Effie even more. The girl lost control, the car spun on the road, and by some miracle, she avoided an accident. When she finally made it to work, she was pale as a ghost. But the poor thing had no idea yet that the sudden appearance of uninvited guests in her car was only the beginning of a chain of misfortune about to come crashing down on her in the very near future. The year 2006 was shaping up perfectly for Effie Ratley. She had a stable job, her own place, a wonderful, loving husband, and an adored newborn son. The road to happiness had been thorny, but she was glad that everything had finally fallen into place in the best possible way. Michael Ratley and his future wife Effie met quite by chance in 2003 when Effie got a flat tire. Michael happened to be driving by and noticed a young woman standing in the middle of the road, looking confused. He stopped and offered his help. The two got to know each other, started talking, and one thing led to another. Their relationship quickly took off. 19-year-old Michael had previously dated girls younger than himself, teenagers just like him. With 25-year-old Effie, everything was different. The two immediately discovered a wealth of shared interests and topics for conversation, such as black and white films or music from the 1950s. But most importantly, they both wanted the same thing out of life: a strong family and children. It was hardly surprising that just 18 months later, they were already married, which unfortunately did not last long. After just 3 months, the spouses separated and divorced. No, there were no irreconcilable differences between them. They didn't fight, and they didn't cheat on each other. That's why they remained on excellent terms and continued to cross paths from time to time. Over the year following the divorce, Michael had clearly grown up and matured, above all emotionally. He realized that he had made a mistake and asked Effie to become his wife again. He explained that when they met, he had been 19 and wasn't sure he was mature enough for Effie. He had been scared and openly admitted that she might find someone better than him. But now he understood that it had all been nothing more than fear. Fear of something new. Fear of a new chapter in their life together. A chapter he now truly felt ready for. Effie, who in fact had never stopped loving Michael, said yes. They remarried in the spring of 2006, after which they moved into their trailer home in the small town of Briceville, Florida. Michael's parents, Steve and Cindy Ratley, owned a 20-acre plot of land in Briceville, where they, along with Michael's sister and her family, lived in separate neighboring houses. Michael and Effie now joined them there. After the couple married and settled into their own place, the next logical and exciting piece of news was that the newlyweds were expecting a child. Their firstborn, Aiden, was born in mid-December. The family was preparing to celebrate Christmas as a family of 3, and it seemed that everything in their lives was falling perfectly into place. They had a home of their own, stable, good jobs, and a wonderful son. But their unquestioned happiness was soon overshadowed by a single incident. On the night of November 27, 2006, just 2 weeks after Aiden was born, a fire broke out in their home. That night, Michael and the baby were sleeping in the living room. From time to time, Michael and Aiden slept in a separate room so Effie could get some rest. Because of this, Michael was the first to realize what was happening. Seeing flames around him, he grabbed his son and ran outside. Effie, meanwhile, was asleep in a back room and found herself trapped. A fierce fire had already erupted in the central part of the house, cutting her off from the exit. When Michael's relatives and several neighbors noticed the fire and the smoke pouring out of the trailer, they rushed to help. But in truth, no one knew what to do. The only thing they were certain of was that by the time firefighters reached their remote property, it would already be too late for Effie. Michael couldn't wait any longer. Tearing a satellite dish off the side of the house, he smashed the bedroom window. Then he began shouting and pounding on the siding, so his wife, who by that point could see absolutely nothing because of the smoke, could follow the sound. She made her way to the window and her husband pulled her outside. When the firefighters arrived and extinguished the blaze, it became clear just how close Effie had been to death. All that remained of the couple's home was its outer shell. Everything inside had been completely destroyed. The spouses lost all of their belongings, but the most important thing was that all three of them were alive. That was exactly what they told journalists who arrived the next day to conduct interviews. Michael Ratley became a local hero overnight for saving his wife and child. Newspapers wrote about his brave actions, and the story was covered on the news. Fortunately, although Effie had inhaled smoke, she was otherwise fine. The couple and their baby temporarily moved in with Michael's parents, who lived nearby. Meanwhile, firefighters determined that the cause of the fire had been faulty wiring. Most likely, the fire had started in the living room, possibly near an outlet where an electric warmer for baby wipes had been plugged in. Another issue that contributed to the severity of the fire was that the smoke detector in the trailer was not working. Thankfully, Michael reacted in time. However, his relief did not last long. Almost at dawn, in the dead of night, on January 27, 2007, an emergency call came in. It was Michael on the line, but he was in such a state that he couldn't put two words together, so he handed the phone to his father and asked him to explain why they needed help. Steve told the 911 operator that his daughter-in-law needed medical assistance. She had likely fallen and was bleeding heavily. When the paramedics arrived, they found Effie in bed. She was taken to the hospital unconscious and in critical condition. Michael said that night he had once again taken care of their young son, and he and Aiden were sleeping in another room while Effie was resting in the bedroom. He was awakened by a noise that seemed to be coming from the bathroom. He went to check and found a shelf that had fallen onto the bathroom floor. Michael then decided to look in on his wife to make sure she was all right. But as soon as he cracked the door open, he was hit by a rush of cold air. The window was wide open. In January, that was unusual even for Florida. Almost automatically, Michael reached for the light switch, and when the light came on, he saw Effie lying in bed, covered in blood. Horrified, Michael began screaming, and the noise woke his parents, who came running. They had been asleep as well, and their son's screams jolted them awake. Michael dialed 911, but was unable to explain anything to the operator and handed the phone to his father. Meanwhile, Michael kept screaming and wailing, making it difficult for Steve to talk to the dispatcher. So his parents sent their son to his sister's house nearby. She worked as a nurse and would know what to do in a situation like that. Steve told the dispatcher that his son's wife was lying in bed, covered in blood. For some reason, he assumed that she had fallen, but when she was brought to the hospital, it became clear that this was no fall or accident at all. She had been struck at least 7 times on the head with a blunt object. Her skull bore distinctive marks in the shape of a 5-pointed star. Most likely, the attack occurred while she was peacefully sleeping in bed. Police officers immediately began working at the crime scene, searching for evidence. No weapon was found in the bedroom. Outside the house, directly behind the bedroom window, lay the window's protective screen. It had been cut. This indicated that the perpetrator had entered the house through the window after cutting the screen. The intruder's task was made significantly easier by the fact that the house was on a plot of land, isolated from the neighbors' homes. It was easy for him to enter Effie's bedroom unnoticed. Although Effie had been brutally beaten, she was not sexually assaulted. Her handbag and wallet remained in their places, so what was the motive? The police hoped to get answers from Effie herself. Unfortunately, detectives never got that chance. Doctors informed the family that Effie would never regain consciousness after the blows she had suffered. 4 days later, the family made the difficult decision to disconnect her from life support. In this way, the family lost a beloved member, and the police lost a key witness. But as it turned out, there was another surviving witness to another attack, because this was the second attack on the family in just 2 days. Literally the night before, Steve had once again called the police to report that an unknown assailant had attacked his son. Returning home from work in the evening, Michael had wanted to quickly stop by his parents' shed to grab something. But before he could even enter, he was struck on the head and fell to the floor. The perpetrator fled before Michael regained consciousness. Since Michael had been hit from behind, he couldn't see the attacker. Although Steve called the police, the family initially decided not to pursue the matter, believing that a simple thief had broken into the shed to take some minor tool and had been caught off guard by Michael. However, now the attack took on a very different light. Detectives could not ignore it. This was the best lead the police had, though unfortunately, Michael couldn't provide any information about the attacker. But the investigators had the idea to check other unsolved cases in the region. Since the family lived in Bryceville, a town of about 4,000 people, this was a reasonable move. The thief and killer could indeed live in a neighboring town and make excursions to commit thefts and attacks. The police found a couple of similar cases. For example, 40 miles from Bryceville, in the town of Fernandina Beach, an unknown person broke into a woman's home and assaulted her. And a week earlier, a female store employee had been beaten and locked in a trap in a warehouse. However, there was nothing that definitively linked these cases. Still, the more investigators learned about the attack on Effie, the more convinced they became that what had happened to the family was not random. The fire, the attack, the murder, all of it seemed like it had to be connected, and it wouldn't be long before detectives realized that they were right. They had simply been looking at what happened from the wrong angle. Until this point, investigators had considered the crime scene as the point of entry for the unknown intruder, searching for clues the elusive killer might have left behind. But now they tried to trace his path into the house, and they couldn't. Apart from the cut window screen, he had left nothing. First, the investigators began to doubt that the killer had even entered through the window. It had been a cold night, frost covering the ground. Accordingly, there should have been traces under the bedroom window, pressed down grass, footprints, and the like. But there were no shoe prints around the house. The windowsill and the window itself were covered with an even layer of dust and grime from outside. This was strange, because if someone had climbed in and out through that window, some of that dust would have been disturbed. Furthermore, laundry baskets stood beneath the window, something the killer would surely have brushed against, but they remained untouched. Inside the bedroom, a pristine white carpet covered the floor, and forensic experts found no dirt, leaves, or twigs that a killer could have carried in on his shoes. In other words, aside from blood spatters, the crime scene yielded nothing. However, the detectives did learn that Michael's sister and her husband, who lived on the same 20-acre family property, had 8 hunting dogs, 2 of which roamed freely. Naturally, the dogs would have raised an alarm if a stranger had been nearby. Yet none of the family members reported hearing any barking that night, neither during the attack on Michael nor on the night of Effie's murder. After careful consideration, the investigators concluded that they had found nothing because no one had actually entered the house at all. It was at this point that the police shifted the focus of their investigation onto the Rattley family itself, more specifically onto one member, Michael. And in doing so, they uncovered a lot of interesting information. Although only about a year earlier, Michael had assured Effie that he was destined for her in heaven and had convinced her to become his wife again, deep down he, to put it mildly, did not truly love her. Michael's friends reported that, in private conversations, he spoke poorly of his wife. He admitted that he hated her and did not want to become a father because he couldn't afford to support a child. At the same time, however, he couldn't allow himself to go through another divorce and pay alimony. But he would have had no objection to receiving $150,000, the amount of Effie's life insurance, in the event of her sudden death. It appeared that investigators had found a possible motive for the murder. Effie's death would bring Michael a sizable sum of money and free him from the burden of legal expenses. Investigators received further confirmation that they were moving in the right direction when Effie's relatives revealed that, before the fire, another incident had occurred with her, one that could have ended tragically. Effie was driving to work and had just pulled onto the busy highway when Michael called, asking her to check whether he had left his medicine in the car. But the moment Effie opened the central console, she let out a scream. Inside the console was a whole swarm of live mice, which she was terribly afraid of. The rodents scattered in all directions, frightening Effie even more. The poor woman lost control, the car spun on the road, and by some miracle, she avoided an accident. When she finally made it to work, she was pale as a ghost. It became clear that her beloved husband had been involved in another incident that could have seriously injured or even killed Effie. The police found it increasingly difficult to believe that all of this was just a coincidence, because when investigators turned their attention to Michael's red Dodge Ram pickup, a seemingly unremarkable vehicle at first glance, it turned out to be a goldmine of evidence. Beneath the back seat, there was a hidden compartment. Opening it, officers realized that their search was over. Inside lay a bloodied hammer, several pairs of gloves, both thin latex gloves and thicker work gloves, a knife, and a pile of paper towels stained with blood. Laboratory specialists confirmed that the blood on the hammer, work gloves, and towels was Effie's. Inside the latex gloves was Michael's DNA. Detectives surmised that on the night of Effie's murder, the following had occurred. Before attacking his wife, Michael had stripped naked and put on 2 pairs of gloves. First the latex gloves, then the thicker work gloves. After beating Effie with the hammer, he wiped the blood off her body with the paper towels, cut the window screen, and hid the evidence in the truck. He then put on his bathrobe and staged a scene of hysteria to draw the attention of his parents. In this way, when the officers arrived, they found no blood on him or his robe. But that wasn't all that was stored under the backseat of his truck. There was also a piece of partially burned electrical wire. Comparison tests confirmed that it was a cable from the wiring of the burned trailer. This meant that the so-called accident was also Michael's doing. When detectives asked Michael to explain how all of these items ended up hidden in his pickup, he put on a look of surprise and claimed he had no idea. The only explanation that came to his mind was the brilliant line, "Someone is trying to set me up." He suggested that it was the same person who had attacked him in the shed, but the police were already doubtful that anyone had actually hit him. After all, Michael was the only one who could confirm the incident. His head showed no serious injury from the supposed blow. Meanwhile, the perpetrator had shown no mercy toward Effie. Overall, it seemed likely that Michael had simply invented the attack, creating the illusion that an unknown criminal was at large and targeting members of his family. This is all the more unbelievable considering the small size of the town they lived in, and the fact that only Michael stood to gain from Effie's death. As for why Michael had saved his wife from the fire a month earlier, investigators were now convinced that Effie was indeed supposed to die that day, either from the smoke or the flames. But he had slightly miscalculated. The trailer was engulfed in a fierce blaze. The bright flames and the roar of the fire drew the attention not only of Michael's parents and his sister's family, but also of other neighbors who ran over to see what was happening. Panicking at the thought that it would look suspicious for him to simply stand calmly outside, Michael handed little Aiden to the relatives and then smashed the window to help Effie escape the burning house. Considering that this act had turned him into a local celebrity, a real-life hero, he figured that no one would suspect him of wrongdoing if, a month later, he tried once again to get rid of his wife, this time for good. But why then had Michael insisted on remarrying Effie? According to the police, the answer was not so straightforward, but in Michael's mind, there were reasons. First, there was obviously the life insurance. $150,000 doesn't just lie around on the road, and Michael would not have minded having it. Second, the police gained a clearer understanding of Michael's character when, in a closet among his belongings, they found a portable DVD player, lubricant, and a large number of DVD discs wrapped in bags. The content was strictly adult and featured only men. Furthermore, by reviewing Michael's phone records, police discovered that he had been calling a 35-year-old man, someone who had once been his high school teacher, far too often and too frequently. Detectives could not establish whether the pair had actually been in a romantic relationship, but that did not matter. In any case, Michael's hatred toward his wife now had an unexpected explanation. He was playing for a different team, so to speak. However, Michael could not accept his own sexuality. Since he denied everything, there is no official confirmation, but for the police, it no longer mattered. A motive for murder is not always that important when there is enough evidence linking the suspect to the crime. At the end of September 2007, 8 months after Effie's murder, Michael was arrested and formally charged. Why had the authorities waited 8 months? The reason was that the police had found DNA from an unknown man on the bedroom window screen. Officers spent 8 months following up on this lead, trying to locate the man. They were unsuccessful. In the end, he could have been simply a worker who had installed the screen. Therefore, Michael appeared before the judge 2 years later. He and his family stuck to the story that he had been set up. They claimed that Michael was a good, kind, and honest man, always ready to help others. They reminded people how he met Effie, helping her when she had a flat tire, even though he could have simply driven by. Michael's defense attorneys went further, arguing that he was simply too stupid to commit such a crime. Michael himself defended his actions, saying that anyone could have planted the evidence in his truck because it was never locked. He claimed he had never harmed Effie and loved her deeply. His only regret was that he hadn't discovered the crime earlier on the night of the murder. If he had heard something, Effie would still be alive. But prosecutors insisted that this was just a performance, and that Michael was a skilled manipulator, especially easy to manipulate the people who already loved him unconditionally, such as his sister and parents. The jury did not believe that some unknown person had been terrorizing Michael and Effie for several weeks, while simultaneously hiding all the evidence in the exact same compartment under Michael's pickup seat. The jury sided with the prosecution, and in July 2009, Michael Ratley was found guilty of first-degree murder. He faced the death penalty, but was spared. He will spend the rest of his life in prison for killing his wife. Michael tried to appeal, but nothing changed. When the truth about Michael's involvement in his wife's death became known, their joint interview with the local media took on a completely sinister tone. While Effie spoke about being grateful to her husband for saving her life and the life of their child, she had no idea that the man who had saved her had actually been responsible for the fire. What's more, he was already planning his next attack on her life, the one that would be more successful. All the while, as Michael stood there talking about how frightened he had been that he almost lost his family, the evidence of his horrific intent and guilt was already lying in the hidden compartment beneath the back seat of his pickup. It was both terrifying and revolting. Having decided he had no other choice, Michael killed his wife and took away the mother from his young son. Aiden had been Effie's pride and joy. She had dreamed so much about motherhood. Tragically, her happiness was cut short just 6 weeks after his birth.